Hello, and welcome to Language and Culture with Dr. Lou. And so today, for the first time, I'd like to talk about a language variety that I haven't spoken about yet, called Scientologese. And that's what I'm calling Scientology terms when used by current and former Scientologists, or even by people speaking about the Church of Scientology. And why am I doing this video? Because I wanted to try to be helpful to anybody who's new to SPTV on YouTube. Because for me, I've been watching SPTV for a little over a year now, maybe almost 2 years. And it took me, as somebody who was never in Scientology and didn't really know anything about it, it took me a while to get down all the lingo, all the jargon that you have to know to really understand everything that SPTV creators are talking about. And so I wanted this to be so that not everybody has to go through like a month of watching videos before you get the terms down. Hopefully, this will help. And so I guess to start with, we got to start with what does SPTV mean? We all know that TV is for television, and SP is actually that is Scientology term, an abbreviation for suppressive person. So that's the first word you're going to want to know is suppressive person. This is what someone gets declared as when they're expelled from the Church of Scientology, or if they speak out publicly against the Church of Scientology, they might be declared SP, suppressive person. And so it's a sad thing if you're declared an SP because everybody else is supposed to disconnect from you, not be in touch. And so you might lose everybody that you know if you were always within the Church of Scientology. And now, so getting on to how we're going to do the ABCs with Scientology, we're going to go through the whole alphabet, one word or expression at a time, starting with A is for auditing. And auditing, of course, if you hear SPTV creators or former Scientologists talk about auditing, is not the same as when, like, we're talking about the IRS auditing you or auditing a class in school. It's a different thing. Auditing is, well, it's sort of one-on-one counseling, but not psychotherapy because Scientology, well, Dianetic auditing is an alternative to psychotherapy. And so the person called the auditor is the one wearing glasses that we see, staring at the little piece of technology, reading what it's telling him. And the person being audited is the guy being evaluated that's holding those two little handles that they call cans. And I'll talk about what is that piece of technology a little later, the e-meter. Um, and so it's an alternative to psychotherapy in terms of psychotherapy would be a competitor to this. And that's part of why, um, well, L. Ron Hubbard declared a sort of war on psychotherapy many years ago. Now, auditing is a big part of the practice of Scientology. It's not all of the practice of Scientology, but it's a big part. For instance, auditing is one of the ways you move along the bridge to total freedom. And so B is for the bridge to total freedom, which is sort of how you move along in Scientology from chaos to total freedom. And so you start look at the chaos and that's where you have the general public and where Scientology field staff members might have to work to wrangle in people from the public with, let's say, free personality test and whatnot. And L. Ron Hubbard's books are also sold and available to the public, and that helps start you along the bridge from chaos to total freedom. And as you can see there, auditing is also part of it, Dianetic auditing. And then you do a lot of different courses, Scientology courses at many different levels. And anyway, there's a lot of steps along the way. And when you hear people on SPTV talking about an OT level or OTL, what is their OTL? That's short for operating Thetan level. And the OT level courses are actually, as you can see, very far along the bridge. You're already pretty advanced on the bridge to total freedom. And by the way, this stuff doesn't come for free. You're paying money over time, more and more money as you're going along the bridge to total freedom. And so um, you have the OT courses and operating Thetan level. And so the truth is that the highest OT level that has been released by Scientology is OT 8. Tom Cruise is rumored to be at OT 8, for example, and they've been waiting for levels 9 and 10 to be released for about 40 years now and still hasn't been released. So one has to wonder if those even exist, or is this just holding out a carrot that doesn't really exist to help get people to keep on trekking towards the bridge to total freedom, trekking along it and paying more and more money. Who knows? And anyway, I'll talk about Thetans a little later as well. And so C is for cult. And how am I bringing that up? Well, a lot of SPTV creators use the word cult when they're describing the Church of Scientology. And this is especially prevalent when you're talking about former Scientologists who have left. They all seem to use the term they escaped Scientology. And that really tells you something. And now the reason that I chose this photograph here, this is, I believe the photo is from the grand opening of the Ideal Org in Paris, France. And why, and to me, this was surprising that Scientology was opening an Ideal Org in Paris, France, because about 25 years ago, 1999, I believe, the French government declared Scientology to be not a church, but a cult. The word in French is une secte. And so to me, that's ironic that Paris, France would be a target of Scientology to set up an ideal org with I mean, look how much that building must have cost them alone. That's wow. And that's also why all the French flags, the blue, white, and red flags in the crowd, we're talking Paris, France, where Scientology is actually technically a cult, according to the French government. And by the way, the French government is not the only one that's come out and taken a strong stance against Scientology. For example, in the United Kingdom, within the last couple years, Scientology lost its tax-exempt church status. And in Germany, the German government does not recognize Scientology as a religion, but they see them as an abusive sect with political goals that are contrary to the German democratic constitution. And so I'm just bringing up Paris, France, because the Ideal Org has just opened there. And it's incredibly ironic that they're still persisting there, even though it's technically considered a cult there. But by the way, in France, it's not illegal to be a cult. the only illegal things might be actions that cult members pursue. And by the way, there has been litigation about, against multiple of the higher ups at different points in Scientology in France. And again, so Scientology is a cult over there, so it doesn't make sense to me that they would be opening this ideal org there. Anyway, getting back to some of what Scientology is about. D, of course, is for Dianetics. And so the book pictured here was the first book that L. Ron Hubbard ever wrote on Dianetics. It's called Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health. Again, so this would be, he labeled psychiatry and psychology as pseudoscience that couldn't possibly be helpful. So Dianetics and Dianetic auditing would be their alternative. And again, like I said earlier, Dianetic auditing is a huge part of the practice of Scientology, including that's a lot of that is involved on your bridge to total freedom. And so, speaking of Dianetic auditing, the e-meter is the piece of technology that you're seeing there. It's an e-meter is short for electrocytometer, and the auditor, the guy doing the evaluation, is the one spinning the little dial, the one wearing glasses, and he's looking to see if he finds a floating needle on the little screen. See the little needle flopping around, and that's going to tell him if the person being evaluated, being audited there, the guy with the cans in his hand, um, if he's having a reaction to different questions or words that the auditor is using. And so this is sort of like a layman's version of psychotherapy, but combined with some aspects of giving somebody a lie detector test. And I've never heard any former Scientologist actually say they enjoyed being audited or being an auditor for that matter. But it's a big part of Scientology. So e-meter, that's the piece of technology that's being used during the Dianetic auditing. And there we go. So F is for fair game. So if someone's declared an SP, the Office of Special Affairs might declare them, so the Church of Scientology might declare them fair game. What does it mean if you get declared to be fair game? Basically, the Church of Scientology is going to try to destroy you, destroy your reputation. Notice it says you may be tricked or sued or lied to or destroyed. You can be deprived of property or injured by any means. And the thing is, the Scientologist who is fair gaming you, who is doing the destroying or injuring of you, they won't be disciplined because this is a policy that L. Ron Hubbard wrote. And so he's the source in Scientology. And so they got to do what he says. And so this is a lot of, there are several lawsuits up against the Church of Scientology right now, specifically for their fair gaming practices. But anyway, that's what we mean by fair gaming. This is the choosing to destroy the reputation and the person who has been declared suppressive person and now declared fair game. And G is for growing up in Scientology, because these are some of the stories I find the most compelling on SPTV, or people who are born and raised in Scientology. And one thing that all the stories seem to have in common is they were taken out of school at a really young age, usually just after primary schooling, and then sort of forced into labor, uh, starting to do I mean, they were also doing some Scientology courses and whatnot often, but they were forced into labor instead of doing school. And so child labor is a big part of growing up in Scientology, as far as I can tell. And now people who grew up in Scientology are often called second gen Scientologists, second generation Scientologists, because these were people who were born into it or who their parents dragged them into it when they were only like 3 or 4. Like Aaron Smith Levin from the channel Growing Up in Scientology. He is the bald man with the beard and the SPTV sign right behind him. He, I believe, started at the age of 4, and he was only in school until he was 12. And then pulled out of school to start auditor training and all of this. Not a good thing. And the woman below him, the blonde woman below him, her name is Jenna Miscavige. Her YouTube channel is also just named Jenna Miscavige. And so she's an interesting story. She grew up in Scientology, escaped it at the age of only 21, which was a little younger than Aaron. He, I think, was in his 30s already by the time he left it. But Jenna, one interesting part about her is that one part about her story is that she's the niece of the leader of the Church of Scientology. Well, he is the leader of RTC, Religious Technology Center, which is the group, he's a leader, he's the chairman of the board of the Religious Technology Center. And the Religious Technology Center is the group that controls Dianetics and Scientology. So for all intents and purposes, he's the leader of Scientology, even though when he was interviewed by Ted Koppel, he said, "No, I'm not the leader. I'm just higher ranking." But he did admit to being the chairman of the board of the RTC, so he's the leader. And Jenna, her story includes, of course, taken out of school, being humiliated, being suppressed, forced into child labor, and all the rest. And she was actually treated even worse than some other people in the Sea Org because her last name was Miscavige, and there's a lot of people with a lot of resentment against her aunt and uncle who were going around. They were all executives yelling at people. So imagine how the little teenager in the Sea Org is going to be treated if the adults around her see this is an opportunity to get back at her aunt or her uncle. Anyway, and so the other woman, the brunette with the glasses in the picture of the bottom right there, is her name is Natalie Webster. Her channel is called Scientology Life After a Cult. I love it. On her channel, she often talks about, well, how she grew up and lived 35, 34, 35 years, something like that in Scientology, and how she escaped with 3 generations of her family altogether. And I love her channel because she does daily recaps of all the news buzzing around the internet about Scientology and protests against Scientology. And so it makes it really easy for me as an SPTV viewer to get caught up because of all the hard work on her daily recap. So thank you so much for that, Natalie. And again, her channel is called Scientology Life After a Cult. Now, H is for human trafficking. Remember when I mentioned the child labor? Some of those children are trafficked as well. And so you can see that in the stories of the people who grew up in Scientology, as well as I wanted to point to human trafficking because there's an active lawsuit against the Church of Scientology right now, specifically because the allegations on public record are about human trafficking and specifically child trafficking and child labor. But human trafficking in the court case is Valeska Paris, AL, versus the Church of Scientology, AL. So she's the lead plaintiff, Valeska Paris, and I don't want to just throw this out there as an opinion thing. So what I'd rather do is give you the statement by the attorney for the plaintiffs. And so the picture show there, Valeska Paris, the lead plaintiff, is the blonde woman there. The Free Winds cruise ship was part of well, where she was supposed to be in servitude and undergoing terrible conditions. And then, of course, David Miscavige is the leader of the Church of Scientology. And so, according to her lawyer, and I quote, our clients were subjected to systematic indoctrination and manipulation that normalizes extremely abusive treatment. Throughout their formative years and into adulthood, they were forced to perform labor under unimaginable conditions. Their lives have been forever altered by this mistreatment. So that's a statement in from the lawyer of the plaintiffs. And so there are multiple people alleging that from their childhood or early adolescence, they were already taken out of school, forced to work, forced into servitude, humiliated, and working under terrible conditions. And yeah, one of the saddest part is this is sometimes from the age as young as 10 years old. So it's upsetting. And again, Burlesque AL versus the Church of Scientology International Incorporated. AL would be the case you want to look at to see the details of it. Now, I is for immortal. And I think this is important to remember because which I'll talk about immortality a little later when I'm talking about the Thetans. But this is one thing that really does help qualify Scientology for me is having a religious belief, religious doctrine, because they do believe that each human has an immortal soul living inside them, essentially, although different than um, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or anything. There's no afterlife. There's no heaven or hell or anything like that. What happens instead is reincarnation. So your soul will live over many, many lifetimes. And so this is the whole immortal soul thing, the immortal spiritual being living inside of you, your Thetan, aka your soul, is reincarnated over and over again. And this is why Scientologists believe in past lives and future lives all the same. So again, I'll get back to this when talking about Thetans. And J is for justice. And so, yes, I'm talking about the victims of Danny Masterson getting justice for what he did to them. Danny Masterson, as you may know, is a very public, very well-known Scientologist. And turns out, well, the Jane Does, his victims, they first went to the Church of Scientology to tell what he had done to them. And what did he do to them? I'm not going to use all the words, but think kind of like Bill Cosby, but possibly even worse because I've never heard of Bill Cosby using a gun while he was assaulting any women after drugging them. Anyway, so the justice is because Danny Masterson is spending the rest of his life or most of it in prison. He's serving two consecutive 15-year to life sentences. And that's a picture of his prison. And um and of course there's a court illustration of well of the trial, of course. And so good uh, for I'm glad that the Jane Does got their justice, even though they were first victimized by Danny Masterson and then re-victimized by the Church of Scientology and then re-victimized by the press to get that justice. Good for them. They got it. And good riddance to Danny Masterson from society because we don't need anybody like him around. And K is for Coster because Francoise Coster, um, she has been a longtime friend of his, of Danny Masterson's. She is the woman with well, glasses and blonde hair and the cell phone in her hand in the photo by the tree. And so the reason that a lot of people find her public enemy number one is because she supported Danny Masterson not only throughout the trial, but then even after he was convicted, and she's still saying things like, I don't know what happened. Nobody knows. We weren't there, but the fact is the conviction happened. So a jury find that to be the Jane Doe's testimony to be evidence convincing enough, and with all the other evidence at play there, convince a jury. So as far as I'm convinced it concerned, it actually happened. And so she is the owner of a bar and grill called La Poubelle, which got a lot of protests because people who had been protesting in LA, um, they had managed to get the testing center to shut down. So then they turned their attention onto La Poubelle, which her restaurant there is pretty much right across the street from the Scientology Celebrity Center in Hollywood, I think maybe North Hollywood. Anyway, and so it's not, she is, Francoise Coster is despised not just because of supporting Danny Masterson and Scientology. I despise her because she was heard saying about the woman being drugged at her restaurant because her restaurant was one of the places where Danny Masterson drugged his victims. And she was heard saying, "Oh, who cares? That kind of thing happens all the time," or something to that effect. And I thought, wow, what a despicable person. And I would hate anybody to base their reputation of the French on their impressions of her. Anyway, just saying. So, yeah, so Francoise Coster, she's a big enemy of most of the SPTV community. Now, L is for Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath. That was the title of her show, her TV show that was on, I think, A&E from 2016 until 2019. And so she talked all about um, well, Scientology being a cult and all the trauma that people go through when they're in it, and fair gaming of SPs when they get out of it, and the whole rest. And she and her co-host, Mike Rinder, who was the man in the photo with her in the top left, they brought on guests who were people who had escaped from the Church of Scientology. And so this show went did a lot of public good, bringing the story of Scientology and how it's not all it's cracked up to be out into public light. And this show is actually how I first heard that maybe Scientology is not such a good thing. And this show is also where I discovered Aaron Smith Levin's channel growing up in Scientology because he was one of the guests on their show and told his story. And that's what really made the show was all the guests who were brought on the show and for no real compensation told their stories of their trauma coming out of the Church of Scientology and from while they were in as well. And so one important thing that happened in addition to public awareness from this show is after this show, some of the people involved, including Aaron Smith Levin, who I mentioned earlier, and Mike Rinder, who you can see there in the top, they all worked together to found a foundation called the Aftermath Foundation, and their website is simply the aftermathfoundation.org. And this is a charity that helps raise the money and spend the money to help people leave Scientology, leave the Church of Scientology to get out. And so if you are trying to leave the Church of Scientology, that one website is one you might consider going to for help, for financial help. I'll talk about the SPTV Foundation a little later, which has a similar mission statement. Anyway, and by the way, Leah Remini is not on the board of the Aftermath Foundation, but she still seems to be very much involved and in communication with several of the board members there, especially with Mike Rinder. Anyway, and for M, we have Miscavige. So again, I mentioned David Miscavige earlier, the ecclesiastic leader of the Church of Scientology, because being the chairman of the board of RTC, he's charged with making sure that L. Ron Hubbard's mission is carried out, more or less, that L. Ron Hubbard's teachings are adhered to and all of that. So he's the leader of Scientology. Sally Miscavige, the woman pictured in the top right with red hair, that picture is pretty old. And why is that? Because Sally Miscavige hasn't been seen in public in over a decade, I'm pretty sure. And that's why I labeled her as his missing wife. And why is missing in quotes? Because I don't think that she has been kidnapped or being held captive anywhere. I think that maybe this is some of her own doing, want to stay out of public view. She used to very much be in public view because not because she's David Miscavige's wife, because she was his assistant. So that's why she would be on stage, on camera, alongside him oftentimes. Then they had a falling out of sorts. She got reassigned to work somewhere else. Remember the human trafficking thing? It's like kind of like military. They can reassign you to work somewhere else on some other base, and then you get shipped off. Anyway, and so I'm thinking that maybe some of this is of her own design, and I would really like to hear her speak out publicly about the why and the how of how she disappeared from all public view. Although, yeah, she would have to come out of hiding to be able to share that with the public. And so the last Miscavige I have mentioned there is, of course, Jenna Miscavige, the woman who grew up in Scientology, then escaped at the age of 21, who is the niece of David and Sally Miscavige there. And it's worth mentioning that Jenna Miscavige wrote a book called Beyond Belief, and it's under her married name, Jenna Miscavige Hill. But anyway, Jenna Miscavige wrote that book about the trauma she went through in Scientology and leaving Scientology and all the rest. So if you're a reader, you might want to check out that book. If not, you can just check out her YouTube channel at Jenna Miscavige. There you go. And now N is for never in. If you hear anybody on SPTV identifying themselves or another as a never in, it simply means this person was never in Scientology. They did not go through it themselves. And there are a lot of people in or adjacent to the SPTV community on YouTube who are never ins. And so I put some of the notable ones on the screen here. On the top left, we have Tommy Scoville. His channel is called The Lifeboat, and I love his channel. He does a lot of it is focused on substance abuse recovery and being a recovering addict and all of this. And he's also very admittedly an ex-convict. He used to be a bank robber, and he's added a lot to the conversation on SPTV. For one, I first started seeing him during the Danny Masterson trial, um, because he knows a little bit about the criminal justice system from the other side, from the side of someone who's been on trial and then convicted, then imprisoned and all of that. So that part I appreciate too. And so right below him, there's that thumbnail from Sterling and Rabbit having a conversation. The never in among these two is Rabbit. The woman in that picture there, she is Alex the Rabbit. Her SPTV channel, well, her YouTube channel is called Down the Rabbit Hole News. She doesn't just do SPTV coverage. Most of what she does is true crime. So it's a very, she's one of my favorite true crime channels, and she also happens to talk about current events with Scientology and SPTV. And and then of course, in the bottom right picture, we have two never ends. DOA, Defender of Ants. He got involved with the protests in Hollywood earlier this year. He's only been in SPTV for about 6 months as far as the making of this video. He's the guy in the fur hat and all of this and the royal cape. And then the guy in the cone head type uh bald cap is called Stevie Weeby. His channel is Stevie Weeby, the Stevie Weeby Show, and his channel, I've appreciated his contributions because it was an interview on his channel with Aaron Smith Levin and Jenna Miscavige that I discovered that even people who grew up in Scientology might not have discovered about the body thetans in Scientology or Xenu, and they might just learn. And because Jenna on that interview admitted that they learned that from watching South Park, which I will get to later. Anyway, there's a lot of other never ends worth checking out, but I just wanted to give you a few examples, and it's easy to network right to their channels because their comments and content might be referenced within other SPTV channels. Now, O is for OSA, which is short for the Office of Special Affairs. Well, I have some initialism, some initials in the right-hand corner and in the right-hand side in black. That's because OSA reminds me of the three creepiest parts that I can think of the United States government: the FBI, the CIA, the NSA. These are parts of the government that I don't even like to think about. I don't even like the fact that they exist. And that's a lot of what OSA does. They do all the legal stuff, um, like the FBI and CIA and the NSA and all of that. And they also do PR for the Church of Scientology. That's why you have PR in the bottom right corner there. And so OSA, by the way, Mike Winder, when he was in Scientology, he was the head of OSA. So he was a very, very important person in Scientology. So that's a guy who knows where all the skeletons are buried, right? Anyway, or the closets where all the skeletons are hidden, whatever metaphor you want. And so below the picture detailing OSA as the Office of Special Affairs, I have a couple examples of initialism because that's another way to get another thing they use a lot in Scientology and SPTV jargon are initials, stand for things like SP for suppressive person. PTS is a potential trouble source. This is somebody who is in contact with a suppressive person and might be under their influence or being influenced by a suppressive person. You get labeled as a PTS if that's your case. Again, RTC is the Religious Technology Center, the group where the board controls both Dianetics and Scientology. And I've already mentioned OT and OTL for operating Thetan level. These are very advanced levels along the bridge to total freedom again. And P is for pull it in. This equates to victim blaming, victim shaming, in my opinion. When some of the Jane Does went to the Church of Scientology and told them what Danny Masterson had done to them, some of them were told, or possibly all of them, were told, what did you do to pull it in? Pulling it in, when something bad happens to you, the Church of Scientology seems to assume it's your fault, like you did something wrong to pull it in. And so, yeah, that's what SPTV creators mean when they say pull it in. It's because it's your own fault when bad things happen to you. Um, and in my mind, that's just victim blaming and victim shaming. And oh, what a terrible thing. Now, Q is for a qual. I wanted to bring this one up. Qual is short for qualifications. And I wanted to bring this one up not because the division of qualifications or the qualifications division of Scientology is especially important to me. The important point is that's another way that we abbreviate a lot of things in Scientologese. It's just a shortened version of a word you might already know. Like for tech, they might say tech if they mean technology or technical even, but often technology. It's always the new golden age of tech, great technology out there. Scientologists seem to really like their tech, like the e-meter, for example, is a piece of tech. And you have org for organization. That will be, there's many sorts of organizations within Scientology, but an org like the ideal org in Paris I talked about earlier, it's basically a big church, a big center of the Church of Scientology, or other things within it, like the Sea Org. That's how they do a lot of the human trafficking. That's how they traffic human labor from place to place. And it's called Sea Org because it started in the 1960s on a fleet of ships. Um, and except then they eventually went onto land, and most Sea Org members work on land. But it's sort of patterned after the United States Navy, where you have a lot of the Sea Org members have different officer ranks in the same way that you would expect in the military. And so another notable abbreviation there is a SEC check. This is short for security check, which is very much an interrogation and with lots of other things involved. And I never heard anybody say that it was any less than psychological torture for them if they've been through it. And of course, we know a lot of these um, abbreviations already, like um, COM for communication, demo for demonstration, evaluation. So a lot of those will come to you very easily, but yeah, keep in mind a lot of these words you don't know are actually abbreviated version of words that you do just, and voila. So a lot of them you can figure out pretty easily. Now, R is for reactive mind. This is a part of Dianetics and Scientology, where the reactive mind, it's a portion of the human mind it only operates on a stimulus response basis. It's totally unconscious. And what it's made up of are all these impressions of past pain and past trauma. Uh, and we call those engrams. So it's not like your analytical mind that just records the fact that your trauma, that the pain exists in there. Your reactive mind is recording the pain or the trauma itself and all the other images or smells or things you felt or anything, all your other perceptions that go along with that little piece of trauma. And one goal in auditing in Scientology is try to get rid of your engrams so that your reactive mind will be under control. Uh, anyway, so that's why the picture there is says learn to control your reactive mind. That's part of the goal of Scientology auditing. And the reactive mind, it doesn't just it doesn't just exemplify a lot of your personal triggers. According to L. Ron Hubbard, it can also make you sick from everything from a common cold to asthma to allergies to sinus infections, high blood pressure, and so on and so forth. So this is part of why they say that, why they claim that Scientology can actually heal you. Like David Miscavige claims that Scientology helped him get rid of his asthma. That's pretty amazing. Or it would be if it were true. I'm not convinced. And S is for South Park. Why South Park? Because in season 9 of South Park, episode 12, they have an episode called Trapped in the Closet. This was the first time that any confidential levels of the upper OT levels, any of that information was injected into pop culture in America, which I love this because this is well, like I mentioned earlier, Jenna Miscavige said this is how she learned about the body thetans and Xenu and all of that. And why is it called Trapped in the Closet? That's not really related to Scientology. There's a whole gag in there where Tom Cruise is in the closet, then John Travolta is in the closet, and R. Kelly goes in the same damn closet with them, which is weird because R. Kelly is not actually a Scientologist. It never has been, as far as I know, but it is relevant. His presence in the episode is relevant because R. Kelly has an album, a multi-part album called Trapped in the Closet. And that he released as a rap opera of sorts in different volumes. But anyway, in the episode, the relevant part about Scientology is that if you know, one of the main characters in South Park is a little boy named Stan. He goes into Scientology for a free personality test. And then they tell him, "Oh, you're depressed, and so Scientology can help you with that, and so you need to come up with $240 to start your first Scientology course." And a lot of what's said in this episode is true. If you want to check what's true, what's not, on the channel Growing Up in Scientology, Aaron Smith Levin did a reaction video to this episode of South Park, which is now about a year ago. He did the reaction video. That is a great reference if you want to see what in that South Park is real in Scientology and what is made up. And anyway, so the Church of Scientology ended up believing that Stan was the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard. And so it was a whole big thing. And so they revealed all of this confidential information from a confidential OT level, OT3, about the intergalactic overlord Xenu, who 75 million years ago froze some aliens from many different planets, injected them into a volcano in Hawaii, and then put an atom bomb or something like that, a hydrogen bomb in there, blew them up. And that's what created the body thetans that are all over people. And we got to get rid of the body thetans because they're not doing anything good. Anyway, all of this is funny to me because it really injected all the craziest beliefs in many people's opinions of the Church of Scientology right into pop culture, which is funny because now if you run into people on Boulevard, Scientology recruiters on Hollywood Boulevard, um, you can tell them, hey, I watch South Park. I don't want to hear a damn word of what you have to say about Scientology. It's a scam, it's a cult, because that's another thing that'll Stan revealed to the world, is that Scientology is a big scam, is a big money scam. And so that's why the episode kind of ends with a bunch of Scientologists threatening to sue Stan over all that. But anyway, so do check out that episode of South Park. It's very fun. Or at the very least, please check out the reaction video, or one of the many reaction videos to that episode that has been made on YouTube. So again, uh, South Park revealed to the United States of America and the rest of the world, because South Park is shown in more countries than just this one. A lot of the craziest parts about Scientology and some of the beliefs that even lower level Scientologists are not supposed to know about. And that involved the body thetans. So again, I described a little bit about how the body thetans were made. That was but because a bunch of frozen aliens were exploded in a volcano in Hawaii, by which was all the order under the intergalactic overlord named Xenu. So, and that's all in a confidential level that nobody's supposed to tell any other people who haven't done the level themselves. They're not supposed to even talk about it. So that's a hell of a kept secret in Scientology. Now, the body thetans, these are not the same thing as actual thetan. The thetan is referring to the immortal spiritual being living inside each of us, that's also known as the human soul. It also expresses the human soul. It's the source of life. And this is also, why we can be considered immortal in a sense, because at least the thetan inside of each of us is an immortal being. And so the thetan, he sets up shop in our body, which are the body, the brain is not the mind in Scientology. The body is not the spiritual being. The body is just a sack of meat and bones. And so this thetan, he he handles and lives in the body. But when the body dies, when we get to body death, and that's called body dropping in Scientology, the Thetan drops the body and then gets reincarnated as another person. So they don't go to heaven or to hell, any afterlife. They just moved on to another lifetime. And what's very different from in reincarnation in Scientology versus in Hinduism, for instance, is that in Scientology, you keep being reincarnated as a human being. Like it's not like going through different species, different creatures. It's, to me, that's interesting. It's very human centric. But anyway, so the Thetan, that's your soul, and that's the actual spiritual being living inside of you. And OT levels, operating Thetan levels, you want to be, the goal is to have your Thetan operating the best, interacting with the world the best, and maybe even being able to exert a little influence over its life the best in the lives of others. That's called being an operating Thetan. So operating Thetan levels, that's why they're near the end of the bridge to total freedom. That is assuming there is an end. I'm guessing since operating Thetan levels 9 through 15 have never been released, there may be no end to that bridge. That's just my thoughts. Now, U is for unmock, which is, I have two definitions here. The first is to become nothing or to disappear or cease to exist. And that would be the intransitive definition of it. Whereas the transitive definition is you're going to destroy something or you're going to make nothing of something. And that part is kind of the opposite of what a Scientologist would mean when they say to mock something. Mocking something is actually to develop it, to make it up, to build it, to make something out of nothing would be mocking. So unmocking is the opposite. It's to destroy. And then V is for victimization. Again, I talked about how the whole pull it in philosophy, telling victims they have pulled it in, that is victim shaming, that is victim blaming. I also talked about how the Church of Scientology told Danny Masterson's victims the same thing. What do they do to pull it in? And also, the Church of Scientology, they re-victimized his victims by doing that. And also they re-victimized by his victims by telling them do not go to the police. And then once they had gone to the police, reported things to the civil authorities, they started fair gaming Danny Masterson's victims, trying to destroy their reputations and all that. And that's why the Danny Masterson's victims, the Jane Does, have a current lawsuit against the Church of Scientology. Again, because the church just re-victimized them and re-victimized them again. And by the way, this plays into the fair gaming tactic, fair game principle that I talked about earlier, which is something that is declared by the Office of Special Affairs, by OSA. So that's why I put them there. And so W is for another never in, William Good, also known as Streets LA. His channel is Scientology Audit, Streets LA. And the screenshot of his YouTube channel is a little bit old in the top left. It shows him with only 140 something thousand subscribers. The fact is, his channel has been on YouTube for, well, he's in the SPTV community for only about a year, and it's already got nearly 250,000 followers. It's pretty impressive. A lot of people. And he started out, like I said, he was a never in. He's a never in. He started out before auditing Scientology. He was a cop watcher, auditing the police, making sure the police are not up to no good while they're out there, make sure they are doing their jobs. Um, so that's an interesting perspective to bring into the Scientology protesting, because guess what? When there was all the protests going on, Scientology, they kept on making calls to the police, sometimes very bogus calls. And turns out the LAPD did not react very well. I mean, there's plenty of video from the protests in LA, some in front of the testing center, some by La Poubelle, showing LAPD reacting terribly, ridiculously from that. And so the picture in the bottom left is William Good. That's a picture of him. He's almost always wearing a hoodie, I've noticed. In almost every video, he's got a different color hoodie on sometimes. And that's why the picture in the bottom right includes a hoodie. And notice the back of the hoodie says the Good Father. He's been lovably named that on SPTV, the Good Father, for William Good, of course. And that's, of course, not his picture. That picture is of a finger puppet, basically, called mini streets. And that is a little sketch, a little repeated sketch done by another SPTV creator and Scientology protester, Confident Chris. So Confident Chris has all these little skits where he has mini streets walking around and saying things and all that. And it's pretty adorable. So I do recommend checking that out. And of course, after W comes X. And of course, X is for Xenu. And this is a screenshot from the South Park episode that I mentioned earlier. This is what they imagine Xenu to look like. Like I said, he's the intergalactic overlord who froze a bunch of criminal aliens and threw them into a volcano in Hawaii 75 million years ago, then blew it up with a hydrogen bomb, which then created all these things called body thetans, which are very, very bad things. I won't go in more into what body thetans are. Um, but yeah, so Xenu, I felt like he was worth mentioning twice. And plus, there's not a lot of words that start with X. Now, of course, after X, we have Y, and Y is for YouTube. That's where SPTV is. That's the best SPTV content. And that, in my opinion, YouTube is also where all the best news about the struggle against Scientology is. SPTV on lots of YouTube channels. And by the way, there are, I think, just over 200 different SPTV creators and channels on YouTube. So it's a very big network and there's a lot to explore there. So please do. By the way, the SPTV Foundation, their website is sptvfoundation.org. So they are a charity, and their mission is to help people leave Scientology and to help people recover once they have left Scientology. So they don't just help the people who are leaving right now or thinking of leaving. They help people who left Scientology, have been through trauma in the past, and they help them pay for some of the things it takes to give them therapy or medical treatment, or let's say they need help finding a place to live or a job, all kinds of different things. And the board members of the SPTV Foundation are actually a bunch of SPTV creators on YouTube. If you want to learn more about the foundation, go to sptvfoundation.org. And if you want to donate money to help people leave Scientology or to help people who have been traumatized by Scientology, that's something you can do there too. And also, if you're a person who's thinking of leaving or has left and needs help, uh, that's also where you could go to contact them. So please do. And I think Aaron Smith Levin, I think he's the president. I think he's the guy who really started putting all this together. But there's a lot of really nice SPTV creators, including some never ends, in fact, who are on the board. And I love that their board is not comprised uniquely of former OSA executives or anything. Is created of people who are still reaching out to the public protesting Scientology. And I think that's good that there's the Aftermath Foundation and the SPTV Foundation, so that gives people options. More options, always better, as far as I'm concerned. Finally, Z brings to something I haven't mentioned yet, the emotional tone scale in Scientology. In this, well, the image here is just like a retro version of it from like 1970s or something. And 0 on the emotional tone scale, that equates to body death. That's when your body dies. 0.01 is while you're dying. 0.0, that's when you're completely dead. But again, your thetan will be reincarnated in another body. So body death, that isn't the end of your immortal life, or the immortal life of your Thetan. And I think the very highest you get on the um, emotional tone scale, around 40, I think, is uh, serenity of beingness. Serenity of beingness. That's someone who has a lot of OT powers at their disposal, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, um, and by the way, one thing I hate about this emotional tone scale is that L. Ron Hubbard declared gay people to be 1.1 on the emotional tone scale. And that's a level that any self-respecting Scientologist would never even associate with somebody who is such a low tone level. So that's a part that makes me think that the so-called Church of Scientology incredibly homophobic. And yeah. And so anyway, that's about it. And so now we've been through Scientologies from A to Z. And by the way, if this video gets decent reactions, I will be happy to put forth further volumes because I know there's a lot more terms in Scientology and SPTV jargon that will be helpful for people to know, but I don't want this video to take for absolutely ever. So that's about it. And thank you to everybody who watches till the very end. I really appreciate that. Bye bye. See you around next time.